Okay, moving on to the next team in the ACC that we will be going over today. That would be Kevin Keatts and his NC State Wolfpack, and I have the Pack projected to come in 8th place in the ACC. And I'll say this, out of all of the coaches in the ACC, I'm not saying that there's pressure on Kevin Keatts, but what I will say is this. The last couple years, really the last 2 years, if you look at NC State, they've been a little bit disappointing. I think the last 2 years, they've had rosters that should have been talented enough to make the NCAA tournament. And 2 years ago, they didn't make it. Last year, they would have been right on the bubble, really 50-50. If they would have made it or not, probably would have came down to the ACC tournament. And I feel like NC State is a team in this year's ACC where a lot of people are going to be divided on them. And I have them coming in 8th. I think they are in a similar range to a Miami or a Syracuse. And they do bring back a lot of returning talent. But the one guy that doesn't return could be their most important player from last year's team, and that's Markel Johnson. He was their starting point guard, and if you watched NC State over the last couple of years, he was really the guy that was able to do everything for this NC State team. He could shoot, he could rebound, he could defend, he was a good leader, and unfortunately his eligibility runs out. And NC State is going to replace him with Cam Hayes, the 6'1 freshman point guard. He's about in that top 50, top 60 range in terms of recruits. And I think he could play a little bit. But to be honest, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to replace what Markel Johnson was to this team. But the good news is for NC State, I do think they return a front court that is very capable and is really good. That's led by DJ Funderburk, the 6'10 redshirt senior, averaged 12.8 and 6 last year, and he's now going to be playing in his 3rd year under Kevin Keatts, much more familiar with the system. I'm a big fan of his. He's really dynamic, really athletic, and he's a problem, very hard for other big men around the ACC to guard. They'll also be bringing back Jericho Helms, the 6'7 junior. He averaged 9.7 points per game last year, 3.4 rebounds per game, and I'm a big fan of his. I love his game. I think he is going to lead NC State in scoring this year. Last year, there were some games where he really emerged and was looking like NC State's most capable and dynamic offensive player. He's versatile with the size he's got, and he's a pretty good and solid defender as well. So I'm a huge fan of Jericho Helms. I think he's going to be a guy that is on my ACC breakout team. And then they also bring back a kid, Devon Daniels, who last year, I'll be honest, was much better than I could have expected. He averaged 12.7 points per game, 5.3 rebounds per game, 2.2 assists per game. And I'm a big fan of his as well. Really good defender. And I think those three, Daniel, Helms, and Funderburk, making up that NC State front court, does provide you with a lot of reasons for optimism. It really just depends on the backcourt for me. And when you look at the NC State backcourt, it's going to be built around Cam Hayes, the freshman guard, Braxton Beverly, the senior, who it's weird. I think as his college career has gone on, the worse he's gotten. And usually it's the opposite, and that's not a very good sign. Last year, Beverly only averaged 7 points per game, about 1.5 rebounds per game, 1 assist per game. I believe he's going to need to be better if this NC State team wants to hit their ceiling. And then they also bring in Thomas Allen, the transfer from Nebraska. He averaged 8.7 points per game and about 3 rebounds per game the last season he played with the Cornhuskers in 2018-2019. And then the rest of the team are really unknowns, guys who it's going to be their first year in the system, like Deron Seaborn, the 6'7 redshirt freshman. He could play. He has good size for a guard. He's probably going to get some big-time minutes in the rotation. They also bring in Shaquille Moore, 6'1 freshman guard, Nick Farrar, the 6'7 wing, AJ Taylor as well. So NC State does bring in a lot of new guys, and I'm curious to see how exactly Kevin Keatts does adjusting to all of these new guys in this NC State rotation, because let's face facts. I started off the segment by saying this, and it still applies. The last couple of years, I do believe NC State has had enough talent to make the NCAA tournament, but they haven't 2 years ago, and I feel like last year there was a very good chance that they weren't going to make it if the ACC and NCAA tournament would have actually happened. So with that being said, I do think it's a big year for Kevin Keatts, because after this year, Funderburk and Daniels are going to be gone, so is Beverly, and if Cam Hayes doesn't work out, what exactly do you have left? Jericho Helms, if he has a good year, he could look at it and say, oh, everyone else is leaving, maybe I'll go to the NBA. So I do think it's going to be a very, very important season for Kevin Keatts and this NC State Wolfpack squad, because they need to win. And if they don't, the rest of the talent on this team could be gone very soon. And it's a big season for Kevin Keatts because, once again, the last couple NC State teams, I think, have been a little disappointing when you compare to, especially my preseason expectations. I really liked what Kevin Keatts was able to do during his time as the head coach of NC Wilmington. And I remember after NC State hired him, his first year, I was like, all right, this program is really going in the right direction. But the bottom line is this: someone should emerge from the point guard committee to succeed Markel Johnson. I think it should be Cam Hayes. And the Wolfpack have some good offense and some good defense at really many positions. I think the center, one guy I forgot to mention is Manny Bates. I think he could be a guy that, if used properly, could be a big impact player for this Georgia Tech, or for this NC State team, And here's the other thing. NC State has had exactly 12 losses in all 3 of Kevin Keatts' seasons as the head coach of the Wolfpack. And honestly, that seems like a reasonable expectation for this squad as well. I need a reason to think why this NC State team is going to be better than previous NC State teams of the past, just because when you look at it, I don't really know what separates, from a talent perspective, this NC State team compared to others. So with that being said, I have NC State finishing in 8th place in the ACC. They do bring in a lot of newer guys, and I do think if NC State wants to exceed these expectations, they'll need an A.J. Taylor or Nick Farrar or a Deron Seaborn to step up, along with the guys returning like your Hayeses, your Beverleys, your Daniels, Helms, Funderburk. I think NC State really... It's known that Daniels, Helms, and Funderburk are all going to be pretty solid players. They're just going to need your Hayeses and your Beverleys of the world to just step up and really improve from what they've done over the last couple of years. If you're Beverly and Cam Hayes, I know it's very hard to be a starting point guard as a freshman, but hey, Kevin Keatts is going to be starting him, and I do believe, with that being said, that does mean Kevin Keatts does believe in him, and he thinks he will be able to get the job done, especially when he's playing with all this returning talent, and Thomas Allen, the transfer from Nebraska, who has a lot of big game experience. So it's a big season for NC State. I have them coming in 6th, and curious to see where they end up.